Sarah Chen had always known she was different from the other kids in her small Texas town. While her classmates played with dolls and video games, she spent hours building model airplanes and staring at the sky, watching commercial jets leave white trails across the blue canvas above. Her bedroom walls were covered with pictures of fighter jets, aviation maps, and photographs of famous pilots throughout history. Her father, a mechanic at the local airport, would sometimes take her to work on weekends. Sarah would sit quietly in the corner of the hangar, watching him repair small aircraft while absorbing every detail about engines, instruments, and flight mechanics. The smell of aviation fuel and the sound of propellers spinning became as familiar to her as her mother's cooking. When Sarah announced at age 16 that she wanted to become a military pilot, the reactions were swift and harsh. Her high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Peterson, looked at her over thick glasses and suggested she consider nursing or teaching instead. "Flying is a man's profession, dear," she said with a condescending smile. "Perhaps you could work for an airline as a flight attendant." The boys in her advanced physics class laughed openly when she mentioned her dream during a career presentation. "Girls can't handle the G-forces," declared Jake Morrison, the star quarterback. "Besides, what happens when you get your period in a fighter jet?" The classroom erupted in laughter while Sarah's face burned with embarrassment and anger. Even her own family expressed doubts. Her grandmother shook her head during Sunday dinner, muttering about how young women these days had unrealistic expectations. "In my day, girls knew their place," she said, serving another helping of mashed potatoes. "Flying machines are dangerous enough without adding emotional women to the mix." But Sarah's father saw something different in his daughter's eyes. He recognized the same burning determination he had felt as a young man when everyone told him he would never amount to anything more than a grease monkey. One evening, as they worked together replacing an engine in a Cessna 172, he turned to her and said, "Kiddo, if this is what you really want, then you fight for it. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do." The path to military aviation was not easy for anyone, but Sarah faced additional obstacles at every turn. When she visited the Air Force recruitment office, Sergeant Williams looked her up and down skeptically. "You sure you wouldn't rather join as a communications specialist or medical technician?" he asked. "Pilot training is extremely demanding, both physically and mentally." Sarah stood straighter and met his gaze directly. "Sir, I've maintained a 4.0 GPA in advanced mathematics and physics. I've logged over 200 hours of civilian flight time, and I can deadlift twice my body weight. I'm here to become a pilot, not to file paperwork or bandage cuts." The sergeant raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. He handed her the initial paperwork and scheduled her for the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test. "We'll see what you're made of, Chen." College at the Air Force Academy proved to be another battleground. Sarah was one of only 12 women in a class of 200 aspiring pilots. The male cadets made their opinions known from day one. During their first formation flight training session, Cadet Thompson deliberately bumped into her while she was reviewing pre-flight procedures. "Hope you don't cry when you wash out," he whispered. "This isn't summer camp." The instructors were equally skeptical. Colonel Martinez, their primary flight instructor, addressed the class on the first day of actual flight training. "Ladies and gentlemen, flying military aircraft requires split-second decision-making, physical endurance, and mental toughness that most of you probably don't possess. I expect to see at least half of you gone by Christmas." His eyes lingered on Sarah and the other female cadets as he spoke. The message was clear. Sarah threw herself into her studies with an intensity that bordered on obsession. While her classmates went to parties or relaxed on weekends, she spent hours in the flight simulator, memorizing aircraft specifications and studying weather patterns. Her roommate, Jennifer, often found her still awake at 2 in the morning, hunched over aerodynamics textbooks. "Sarah, you need to get some sleep," Jennifer would say. "You're going to burn yourself out." But Sarah knew she couldn't afford to be just as good as her male counterparts. She had to be better, Every mistake would be attributed to her gender, every success dismissed as luck or lowered standards. The pressure was enormous, but it only fueled her determination. Her first solo flight came 6 weeks into training. As she climbed into the cockpit of the T-6 Texan trainer aircraft, Sarah could hear snickering from some of the male cadets watching from the flight line. "$10 says she crashes on landing," someone whispered loud enough for her to hear. Sarah ignored them and ran through her pre-flight checklist with methodical precision. She had practiced this routine hundreds of times in simulation, but sitting alone in the cockpit of a real aircraft was different. The responsibility was entirely hers now. The engine roared to life, and Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervous energy. She taxied to the runway, received clearance from the control tower, and pushed the throttles forward. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, and at precisely the right moment, Sarah pulled back on the stick. The ground fell away beneath her, and for the first time in her life, Sarah was truly flying alone. The Texas landscape stretched out below her, a patchwork of farms and small towns connected by ribbons of highway. The sun glinted off the wings of her aircraft, and she felt a profound sense of freedom and purpose. She completed the prescribed training route flawlessly, practicing turns, climbs, and descents with the precision of a Swiss watch. When she lined up for her final approach back to the base, Sarah could see the group of instructors and fellow cadets gathered near the runway to observe her landing. The touchdown was perfect, a gentle kiss of rubber against asphalt that would have made any commercial airline pilot proud. As she taxied back to the flight line and shut down the engine, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. She had done it. Colonel Martinez approached her aircraft as she climbed out of the cockpit. His expression was unreadable as he looked her over from head to toe. "Not bad, Chen," he said finally. "Not bad at all." It was the closest thing to a compliment she had received from him since arriving at the academy. 2 years later, Sarah graduated from the Air Force Academy in the top 10% of her class. She had earned the respect of most of her instructors and fellow cadets through her consistent performance and unwavering dedication. But the real test was just beginning. Advanced fighter pilot training at Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas was where dreams either came true or died spectacular deaths. The sleek T-38 Talon jets that lined the flight line represented the gateway to becoming a true military aviator. These supersonic trainers would push students to their physical and mental limits, separating those who could handle the demands of high-performance aircraft from those who could not. Sarah's class consisted of 24 carefully selected pilots from various military academies and officer training programs. She was the only woman. The instructor pilots, all veteran fighter pilots with thousands of hours of combat experience, made no attempt to hide their skepticism about her presence in the program. Major Rodriguez, the squadron commander, called her into his office during the first week of training. His walls were covered with photographs from his deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, along with awards and commendations earned in combat. "Chen, I'm going to be straight with you," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I've been flying fighters for 15 years. I've never flown with a female pilot in combat. And frankly, I have concerns about how you'll perform under pressure. This isn't about political correctness or equal opportunity. When lives are on the line, I need to know that every pilot in my squadron can handle whatever gets thrown at them." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Sir, I understand your concerns, but I would ask that you judge me based on my performance, not on assumptions about my gender. I've worked twice as hard as anyone else to get here, and I'm prepared to continue doing whatever it takes." Major Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But understand that you'll be under a microscope. Every mistake will be magnified, and there will be people hoping to see you fail. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied without hesitation. The training was brutal from day one. Students were expected to master complex aerial maneuvers, learn to operate sophisticated weapon systems, and develop the situational awareness necessary to survive in aerial combat. The G-forces during high-performance turns were crushing, literally pressing pilots into their seats with forces several times their body weight. During her first formation flying exercise, Sarah struggled to maintain her position relative to the lead aircraft while pulling heavy Gs through a series of combat maneuvers. The physical strain was enormous, and she could feel consciousness beginning to slip away as blood drained from her brain during the turns. "Falcon-12, you're falling behind," the instructor's voice crackled through her headset. "Maintain formation position." Sarah gritted her teeth and used every technique she had learned for fighting G-induced loss of consciousness. She tensed her leg and abdominal muscles, controlled her breathing, and focused intensely on her instruments. Slowly, she managed to work her way back into proper formation position. After landing, Captain Stevens, one of the instructor pilots, approached her on the flight line. "Rough flight out there, Chen," he said with a smirk. "Maybe you should consider transitioning to transport aircraft, less demanding on the body." Other students overheard the comment, and some nodded in agreement. "Yeah, flying cargo planes might be more your speed," added Lieutenant Wilson, a cocky pilot from the Naval Academy. "Leave the fighter jets to the men." Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I appreciate the suggestion, sir, but I'm here to become a fighter pilot. Bad flights happen to everyone during training. I'll do better tomorrow." And she did. Sarah spent that entire evening in the gym, working on exercises specifically designed to improve G tolerance. She studied her flight recordings, analyzing every mistake and developing strategies to improve her performance. She consulted with the base flight surgeon about techniques for maintaining consciousness during high G maneuvers. The next day's flight went significantly better. Sarah maintained perfect formation position throughout a demanding series of aerial combat maneuvers. During a simulated dogfight exercise, she successfully engaged and defeated 2 separate opponents using tactics she had spent hours studying and practicing. As the weeks progressed, Sarah's flying improved dramatically. She developed a reputation for thorough preparation and clinical precision in the cockpit. While some of the other students relied on natural talent and quick reflexes, Sarah compensated with superior knowledge of aircraft systems and tactical procedures. Her call sign assignment came during the 8th week of training. Fighter pilot call signs were typically earned through some memorable incident or personality trait, often with humorous or embarrassing origins. Sarah had been dreading this moment, knowing that her fellow students would probably choose something demeaning or condescending. The naming ceremony took place in the squadron bar after flying operations had concluded for the day. Students and instructor pilots gathered around while Major Rodriguez called Sarah to the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to assign our newest pilot a proper call sign," he announced. "Let's hear some suggestions." The room erupted with various proposals. "How about Princess?" called out Lieutenant Wilson. "Or maybe Barbie," added another student. The suggestions grew progressively more insulting, with several pilots proposing names that questioned her abilities or made crude references to her gender. Sarah stood quietly, maintaining her composure despite the humiliation. This was part of the culture she had to endure if she wanted to succeed in this male-dominated field. Finally, Captain Stevens raised his hand. "I've got one," he said with a malicious grin. "How about Crash? You know, for all those rough landings during training." The room filled with laughter. Sarah had indeed experienced some challenging landings during her early training flights, though her recent performance had been flawless. The name was designed to be a permanent reminder of her struggles and to undermine her confidence. Major Rodriguez looked around the room, gauging the reaction. "Any objections?" he asked. When no one spoke up in Sarah's defense, he nodded. "Crash it is." But Lieutenant Colonel Baker, the wing commander who had been observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. "Actually, I think we can do better than that," he said. His voice carried the authority of someone who had flown combat missions and earned respect through decades of service. "I've been watching this pilot's progress for the past 2 months," he continued. "Yes, she had some rough flights early on, but so does every student pilot. What I've seen lately is someone who prepares more thoroughly than anyone else, flies with precision and discipline, and has the mental toughness to improve after every setback." He paused and looked directly at Sarah. Falcons are known for their keen eyesight, their speed, and their ability to strike with deadly precision. They're also known for their fierce determination and their refusal to give up when hunting prey. Lieutenant Colonel Baker turned to address the room. "This pilot has demonstrated all of those qualities. Her call sign will be Falcon." The room fell silent. It was unusual for a wing commander to override a call sign decision made by the squadron, but no one was going to argue with someone of his rank and experience. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude and pride. For the first time since beginning fighter pilot training, someone in authority had publicly recognized her abilities and potential. The name Falcon felt right, reflecting both her determination and her precision in the cockpit. As the weeks continued, Sarah's flying reached new levels of excellence. She consistently scored among the top students in air-to-air combat exercises and demonstrated exceptional skill during high-stress scenarios. Her preparation and attention to detail became legendary among the instructor pilots. The final exam was a complex multi-phase mission that tested every skill learned during training. Students had to navigate to multiple target areas, engage simulated enemy aircraft, and return to base while dealing with various emergency scenarios introduced by the instructors. Sarah's mission went flawlessly. She arrived at each checkpoint precisely on time, successfully engaged all assigned targets, and handled 2 simulated aircraft malfunctions with textbook procedures. Her radio communications were crisp and professional throughout the flight. When she landed and taxied to the flight line, Sarah could see Major Rodriguez and several other instructor pilots waiting for her. Their expressions were serious, giving no indication of how she had performed. "Falcon," Major Rodriguez said as she shut down the engine and climbed out of the cockpit. "That was one of the finest demonstration flights I've seen in my 10 years as an instructor pilot. Congratulations. You've earned your wings?" 3 years after earning her wings, Captain Sarah Chen found herself assigned to the 421st Fighter Squadron at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, flying the F-16 Fighting Falcon. The irony of flying an aircraft that shared her call sign was not lost on her, though she suspected the assignment was more than coincidental. The squadron was deploying to a forward operating base in the Middle East within 6 months, and the training tempo was intense. Sarah had proven herself capable during peacetime operations, but combat deployment would be the ultimate test of her abilities as a fighter pilot. The mockery had not completely disappeared, though it had become more subtle over the years. Some pilots still questioned whether women belonged in combat aircraft, especially during high-stress situations. During mission planning sessions, Sarah often noticed colleagues exchanging glances when she offered tactical suggestions, as if her ideas carried less weight simply because of her gender. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson had recently taken command of the squadron. He was a decorated combat veteran with multiple deployments and a reputation as an old-school fighter pilot who valued tradition above all else. His first squadron meeting set a clear tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to war in 6 months," he announced to the assembled pilots. "When we get downrange, there's no room for political correctness or social experiments. Every pilot in this squadron needs to be absolutely lethal, completely reliable, and tough enough to handle whatever the enemy throws at us." His eyes lingered on Sarah as he spoke. The message was unmistakable. During the following weeks, Sarah noticed that she was being assigned to less challenging training missions compared to her male counterparts. While other pilots practiced complex air-to-ground attacks and close air support scenarios, she found herself repeatedly assigned to basic combat air patrols and simple escort missions. Captain Mike Davis, one of the more experienced pilots in the squadron, approached her after one particularly frustrating day. "Falcon, you need to understand that some people are concerned about having you on the deployment," he said quietly. "It's not personal, but there are questions about whether you can handle the pressure when lives are actually on the line." Sarah felt her patience wearing thin. "Mike, I've had the highest scores in the squadron on every evaluation for the past year. My aircraft systems knowledge is better than anyone else's, and I've never failed to complete a mission objective. What exactly do I need to prove?" "Look, you're a good pilot," Davis replied. "But there's a difference between training and combat. When you're taking ground fire and making split-second decisions with friendly forces depending on you, some of us wonder if you'll freeze up or make emotional decisions instead of tactical ones." The conversation was interrupted by the squadron operations officer calling everyone to the briefing room. A priority message had come in from headquarters, and Colonel Thompson looked unusually serious as he addressed the assembled pilots. "We just received word that one of our sister squadrons deployed to Afghanistan has lost 2 aircraft in the past week," he announced. "Command is accelerating our deployment timeline. We leave in 3 weeks instead of 6 months." The room buzzed with nervous energy. 3 weeks was barely enough time to complete their pre-deployment preparations and final training exercises. Every pilot would need to demonstrate combat readiness in a compressed time frame. The next few weeks were a blur of intensive training flights, weapons systems reviews, and survival school refreshers. Sarah threw herself into the preparation with her characteristic intensity, studying intelligence reports from the theater of operations and memorizing every detail about potential threats and target areas. 2 days before deployment, the squadron conducted its final major training exercise. The scenario involved multiple aircraft conducting coordinated strikes against simulated enemy positions while dealing with surface-to-air missile threats and enemy fighter aircraft. Sarah was assigned the call sign Falcon-12 for the exercise and tasked with providing close air support for a simulated ground operation. The mission required precise weapons delivery in close proximity to friendly forces, demanding the highest levels of accuracy and situational awareness. As the exercise began, the simulated battlefield quickly became chaotic. Multiple aircraft were maneuvering in the same airspace, while ground controllers provided rapid-fire updates about target locations and friendly force positions. The stress level was intentionally high to replicate combat conditions. "Falcon-12, this is Hammer 21, the ground controller's voice crackled through Sarah's headset. "We have troops in contact, approximately 2 kilometers north of Checkpoint Charlie. Need immediate close air support on enemy positions marked by smoke." Sarah quickly located the target area on her display and began her attack run. But as she approached, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The coordinates provided by the ground controller would place her weapons dangerously close to a building that intelligence reports indicated might contain civilians. "Hammer 21, Falcon-12, she transmitted. "I'm showing possible civilian structures near the target area. Request confirmation of target coordinates and civilian status." "Falcon-12, no time for extended coordination," came the reply. "Troops are taking heavy fire. You are cleared hot on the original coordinates." Sarah found herself facing exactly the kind of split-second decision that her critics claimed she couldn't handle under pressure. Follow orders and potentially harm innocent civilians, or delay the attack and risk the lives of the ground forces depending on her. In training scenarios, there was always a correct answer built into the exercise. But this felt different, more realistic and ambiguous. Sarah realized that this was likely an intentional test of her judgment under pressure. She made her decision in less than 3 seconds. "Hammer 21, Falcon-12 is adjusting attack heading to minimize civilian risk. Estimate 30-second delay for repositioning." Sarah pulled her aircraft into a sharp turn. bleeding off speed and altitude to set up a different attack angle that would achieve the same tactical objective while avoiding the questionable building. The maneuver was technically challenging, requiring precise aircraft handling in a high-stress environment. Her weapons release was perfect, with simulated bombs impacting exactly on target. The exercise controllers immediately confirmed successful mission completion with no civilian casualties or friendly fire incidents. As she climbed away from the target area, Sarah heard Colonel Thompson's voice on the radio. He had been monitoring the exercise from the command center. "Falcon-12, outstanding mission execution," he transmitted. "Your tactical judgment and weapons delivery were exactly what we expect from our combat pilots." When the squadron debriefed the exercise later that afternoon, Colonel Thompson addressed the specific scenario Sarah had faced. "Ladies and gentlemen, Falcon-12 just demonstrated exactly the kind of decision-making we need in combat," he said, looking directly at her. "She was given a challenging tactical problem, made a sound judgment call under pressure, and executed flawlessly. That's the standard I expect from every pilot in this squadron." The room was quiet, but Sarah could see the expressions on her fellow pilots' faces changing. Some looked surprised, others impressed. A few of her harshest critics nodded with grudging respect. Captain Davis approached her after the briefing. "That was solid flying, Falcon," he said. "I think I misjudged you." The deployment to Afghanistan went smoothly from Sarah's perspective. She flew over 50 combat missions, providing close air support for ground operations and conducting armed reconnaissance patrols. Her performance was consistently excellent, and she quickly earned the trust and respect of the ground forces she supported. On her final combat mission, Sarah was providing overwatch for a special operations team conducting a high-risk raid deep in enemy territory. The operation had gone well initially, but the team came under heavy fire while extracting from the target area. "Falcon-12, this is Viper 6, the Special Operations Team leader transmitted. "We're taking heavy contact from multiple positions. Need immediate close air support. Danger close." Sarah could see the enemy positions firing at the extraction helicopters, but the friendly forces were very close to the targets. It was exactly the kind of high-stress, high-stakes scenario that had defined her entire career. "Viper 6, Falcon-12 has eyes on enemy positions," she replied calmly. "Stand by for fires." Her attack runs were surgical in their precision, destroying enemy fighting positions while avoiding any risk to friendly forces. The Special Operations Team extracted safely, and the mission was considered a complete success. When Sarah landed back at base after the mission, she found Colonel Thompson waiting for her on the flight line. "Falcon, I just got off the radio with Viper 6, he said. "They specifically requested that I pass along their thanks. They said your close air support tonight was some of the best they've ever seen." He paused and extended his hand. "I owe you an apology, Captain. When you first arrived in my squadron, I had doubts about whether you belonged here. You've proven me wrong, and you've proven that you're one of the finest combat pilots I've ever had the privilege to command." The radio call that had seemed impossible just a few years earlier now felt completely natural. "Falcon-12, you are authorized for all future combat operations." Sarah had finally earned her place not through politics or lowered standards, but through skill, determination, and proven performance under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The little girl who had once stared at the sky dreaming of flight had become exactly what she had always known she could be: one of the finest fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. The mockery had stopped completely. In its place was something far more valuable: the hard-earned respect of her peers and the knowledge that she had proven herself worthy of the wings she wore and the aircraft she flew. When younger female pilots now asked for advice about pursuing careers in military aviation, Sarah would tell them the same thing her father had told her years earlier. "If this is what you really want, then fight for it, and don't let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do. The sky, after all, belonged to everyone brave enough to claim it."